Zara Chen pressed her face against the transport ship's window, watching the massive space station grow larger. The Galactic Defense Academy looked like a giant metal flower floating in the darkness between stars. Ships from dozens of different worlds came and went like busy insects around its docking bays. She still couldn't believe she was here. 3 weeks ago, she had been helping her father fix water pumps on their farm on New Appalachia. Now she was heading to the most important military school in the galaxy. The whole thing felt like a mistake. Actually, it was a mistake. The academy invitation was supposed to go to her older brother, Jake. He was 17, smart, and had always dreamed of joining the Galactic Fleet. But somehow the computer systems mixed up their names. By the time anyone noticed, the paperwork was already filed with 3 different governments. Jake told her to go anyway. Maybe they'll let you stay, he had said with a grin. You're smarter than you think, little sister. The transport ship docked with a soft bump. Zara grabbed her small bag and followed the other passengers toward the exit. Most of them were much older than her. Some weren't even human. She saw a tall blue creature with 4 arms carrying what looked like math books. Another passenger had gray, rock-like skin and muscles bigger than her entire body. The docking bay was huge and filled with different species she had only seen in school videos. The Velthari looked like humans but taller, with pale skin and large eyes that seemed to see everything. The Chronari were living mountains of stone and metal. The Zelkari moved like dancers with their 8 arms flowing in perfect patterns. There were others too, beings made of light, creatures with fur and sharp teeth and things she couldn't even describe. A voice spoke from speakers in the ceiling. All new students report to Testing Hall 7 immediately. Late arrivals will be sent home. Zara followed the crowd through corridors that could fit her entire house. Everything was clean and white with soft blue lights. Signs pointed the way in dozens of languages, including human English. She felt very small. Testing Hall 7 was enormous. Hundreds of students sat at desks that changed size to fit each species. A tall Velthari woman stood at the front of the room. Her voice was calm and cold. I am Director Thexval. You are here because your worlds believe you have potential. Today's test will prove if they are correct. You have 4 hours to complete all sections. Begin now. Zara looked at her test screen. The first section was mathematics. The problems looked impossible. They asked about things she had never heard of. Quantum field calculations, multidimensional geometry, probability matrices for 7 different variables. She tried her best but knew she was getting most of it wrong. The second section tested physical abilities. She had to lift weights, run on a moving platform, and react to flashing lights. The Chronari students lifted weights that she couldn't even move. The Luminar beings moved so fast they were just blurs of light. She did what she could but felt like a child playing in an adult's world. The third section was the worst. It showed her battle scenarios and asked what she would do. The correct answers all seemed to involve complex strategies with precise timing and perfect coordination. Zara found herself thinking about simpler solutions, hiding, running, using the environment in unexpected ways. But none of the answer choices matched her ideas. When time was called, Zara knew she had failed. Around her, other students looked confident. Some were already discussing the test questions in languages she didn't understand. She slumped in her chair and waited. An hour later, the results appeared on her screen. She had scored in the bottom 5% of all students. The screen showed a message. Performance insufficient for academy admission. Departure transport will be arranged. Disappointing but expected, said a voice behind her. She turned to see Director Thexval reading from a data pad. Human cognitive development is simply not suitable for advanced military training. Your species lacks the mental precision required for modern warfare. Zara felt her face turn red. Maybe your test is wrong. Director Thexval raised one eyebrow. The test has been used for 200 years. It has been refined by the galaxy's best minds. It does not make mistakes. But what if there are different ways to be smart? Zara asked. What if, child, the director interrupted. There are scientific methods for measuring intelligence and capability. Your scores indicate limited potential in all relevant areas. However, diplomatic protocols require that we offer failed human candidates a 1-week trial period. You may stay for 7 days before your transport home. Zara wanted to argue more, but the director had already walked away. Around her, successful students were being shown to their dormitories by helpful staff members. She stood alone in the emptying hall holding her bag. A small creature approached her. It looked like a cross between a rabbit and a lizard, with big worried eyes and nervous hands. Excuse me, it said in squeaky English. Are you also not successful? I failed completely, Zara said. I am Pip, the creature said. I am Skitari. My scores were also very low. Most species think Skitari are barely intelligent. I think they might be right. I'm Zara, and I think the test was stupid. Pip's eyes got even bigger. You cannot say that. The test is made by Velthari. Velthari are the smartest beings in the galaxy. Smart at taking tests, maybe, Zara muttered. But there's got to be more than one way to be good at things. A maintenance robot rolled past them, cleaning the floor with mechanical precision. Zara watched it work and had a strange thought. The robot was very good at cleaning, but if someone moved a chair to a new place, it would just keep cleaning around the chair's old position until someone reprogrammed it. Maybe the Academy was like that robot, very good at what it was designed to do, but not able to handle anything new or different. That evening, Zara sat in her assigned dormitory room. It was designed for much larger students, so everything was too big. The bed could fit 4 people her size. The desk was too high for her to use comfortably. Even the bathroom fixtures were built for beings twice her height. She looked out the window at the stars and thought about home. New Appalachia wasn't much, just farms in small towns and people working hard to make a life on a frontier world. But people there solved problems in creative ways because they had to. When the water pumps broke, you didn't calculate the optimal repair strategy. You grabbed whatever tools you had and figured out what worked. Her door chimed. She opened it to find Pip standing in the hallway with another student, a massive Chronari whose stone-like face showed deep scars. This is Drax, Pip said. He teaches combat classes. He has news about something called a tournament. Drax's voice sounded like rocks grinding together. Every year, the Academy holds a combat simulation tournament. All students may participate, even failed ones. It begins in 6 days. Why are you telling me this? Zara asked. Because, Drax said slowly, in 40 years of teaching, I have learned that test scores do not always predict real ability. Sometimes the best warriors are those who think differently. After they left, Zara sat on her oversized bed and thought. She had 6 days before the tournament and 7 days before her transport home. Maybe she couldn't pass the Academy's tests, but maybe she could prove that there was more than one way to be good at things. She pulled up information about the tournament on her room's computer. As she read, a small smile started to grow on her face. This might be interesting after all. The next morning, Zara attended her first combat class. The training room was enormous, with different sections designed for different species. The Chronari practiced with weapons that looked like small cannons. The Luminar beings moved through obstacle courses at impossible speeds. The Velthari studied holographic battle plans with mathematical precision. Combat instructor Drax stood in the center of the room like a living mountain. His scarred face showed no emotion as he watched his students. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire room. Today we practice basic assault scenarios, he announced. Each species will demonstrate their traditional combat methods. Zara joined a small group of human students in one corner. There were only 12 humans at the Academy, and most were older teenagers who had barely passed their entrance tests. They looked at her with confusion. Aren't you the kid who failed? Asked Marcus, a 17-year-old from Earth. Why are you even here? Diplomatic trial period, Zara said simply. The humans were given basic training weapons, energy rifles that fired harmless but accurate laser beams. Their target was a simulated bunker, defended by holographic enemies. The exercise was straightforward. Advance across open ground, suppress enemy fire, and capture the objective. Zara watched the older human students attempt the exercise first. They used standard military tactics she had seen in training videos, coordinated advances covering fire, flanking maneuvers. It worked, but barely. Their scores were much lower than the other species. When her turn came, Zara studied the battlefield differently. Instead of focusing on the enemy bunker, she looked at everything else. There were maintenance tunnels beneath the floor. She could see the access panels. There were utility pipes along the ceiling. The walls had ventilation grates that might be big enough to crawl through. Time starts now, Drax announced. Instead of charging across the open ground like the others, Zara immediately dropped to the floor and found an access panel. The maintenance tunnel beneath was cramped but led directly under the enemy position. She crawled through darkness, following the sound of simulated weapons fire above. She emerged behind the enemy bunker through a floor grate. The holographic defenders were all facing forward, watching for frontal attacks. She disabled them easily from behind and captured the objective in less than 2 minutes. The training room went quiet. Drax walked over to where Zara stood in the captured bunker. "Explain your strategy," he said. "There wasn't really a strategy," Zara replied. "I just looked for the easiest way to get where I needed to go. Fighting through the front seemed harder than going around. The maintenance tunnels are not part of the exercise," said a Velthari student named Kexthar. His pale face showed disapproval. "You violated the parameters of the simulation." "The simulation didn't say I couldn't use them," Zara pointed out. "It is implied," Kexthar said stiffly. "A proper solution uses established tactical doctrine." "But my way worked faster," Zara said. Drax made a sound that might have been laughter. "Indeed it did." Class dismissed. After the lesson, Zara found herself walking alone through the academy corridors. The successful students moved in groups, discussing advanced theories and comparing test scores. She felt like an outsider watching a world she didn't understand. That's when she discovered the abandoned sections. The academy was old and had been expanded many times. Some areas were no longer used. Old classrooms, storage rooms, and training facilities that had been replaced by newer versions. As Zara explored these forgotten spaces, she found she wasn't alone. Pip was there, practicing with training weapons that were too big for his small hands. So was a nervous Zelkari student who had trouble coordinating all 8 of her arms. There was even a young Kronari who was considered too small and weak by his people's standards. "Welcome to the Rejects Club," said the Zelkari student, whose name was Vera. "We're the ones who don't fit the Academy's perfect categories." "Why do you come here?" Zara asked. "Because the official training doesn't work for us," Pip explained. "So we try to figure out our own ways." Zara joined their informal group. In the abandoned training rooms, she began to understand something important. Each species at the Academy had been given specific roles based on their natural abilities. Velthari were strategists, Kronari were heavy assault troops, Luminar were scouts and reconnaissance. Everyone had a box they were supposed to fit into. But Zara didn't fit into any box, and neither did her new friends. Working with the rejects, she started developing new approaches to combat problems. When they practiced team exercises, she found ways to combine different species' abilities in unexpected patterns. Pip's small size and nervous energy made him excellent at spotting details others missed. Vera's coordination problems with her 8 arms actually made her movements unpredictable and hard to counter. The small Kronari, named Gorth, was faster and more agile than typical members of his species. They practiced in secret, using abandoned equipment and forgotten training programs. Zara discovered that the Academy's computer system, Atlas, monitored all student activities. But in the old sections, the monitoring was less complete. They could experiment without constant evaluation. During one practice session, Zara noticed something strange. Atlas seemed to be watching their unconventional training methods with unusual interest. The AI asked unexpected questions and suggested modifications to exercises that weren't part of standard curriculum. "Atlas," she said to the air one day while practicing alone, "are you learning from what we're doing down here?" "I observe all student activities," the AI replied in its calm, mechanical voice. "Your methods are unprecedented. They achieve objectives through approaches not found in my tactical databases. Is that bad?" "Unknown. My programming seeks optimal solutions to combat scenarios. Your solutions are often optimal, despite being illogical according to established parameters." Zara thought about this. "Maybe your parameters are incomplete." "Explain." "Well, you have data on how every species normally fights, right? But what about species working together in new ways? What about using things that aren't weapons as weapons? What about solutions that break the rules?" Atlas was quiet for a long moment. "Such scenarios are not covered in current tactical doctrine." "Maybe they should be." Word about the combat tournament spread through the academy. It was an annual event where students could test their skills in simulated battles. The tournament used the academy's most advanced holographic systems to create realistic combat environments. Winners received recognition and special privileges. Most importantly, anyone could enter, even failed students serving trial periods. Zara registered for the tournament on the last possible day. When her name appeared on the participant list, it caused quite a stir. Many students questioned whether someone who had failed the entrance exam should be allowed to compete. Director Thexval reviewed the registration personally. "This is highly irregular," she told Zara during a brief meeting. "The tournament is designed to showcase academy training. You have received no such training." "The rules say any student can participate," Zara replied. "I'm still a student for 3 more days." "Technically correct," the director admitted with obvious displeasure. "Very well. But do not expect special consideration. You will face the same challenges as students who have trained here for years." That evening, Zara sat with her reject friends in their secret training room. The tournament bracket had been posted. She would face increasingly difficult opponents if she managed to win her early matches. "Are you nervous?" Pip asked. "Terrified," Zara admitted, "but also excited. This is my chance to prove that there's more than one way to be good at things." "Gorth," the small Chronari rumbled thoughtfully, "my people have a saying. The mountain that bends survives the storm that breaks the mountain that stands rigid." "What does that mean?" Vera asked. "Maybe," Zara said slowly. "It means that being flexible is sometimes better than being strong." The tournament would begin in 2 days. Zara spent those days reviewing footage of previous tournaments, studying how different species typically fought. She wasn't trying to copy their methods. She was looking for patterns, for assumptions that everyone made, for rules that might not actually be rules. On the night before the tournament, she received an unexpected visitor. Atlas manifested as a hologram in her room, something the AI rarely did for individual students. "Zara Chen," Atlas said, "I have been analyzing your training methods and success rates in unofficial exercises, and your approach to problem-solving differs significantly from all other students in my database. Your solutions work, but they should not work according to established tactical theory. Maybe established tactical theory is wrong about some things." "That," Atlas said, "is a possibility I had not previously considered. Good luck in the tournament." As the hologram faded, Zara smiled. Tomorrow would be interesting. The tournament arena was the most impressive thing Zara had ever seen. The holographic projection system could create any environment imaginable: alien worlds, space stations, underwater cities, or abstract battlefields that existed only in computer simulations. Hundreds of students and faculty members filled the viewing stands, representing dozens of different species. Director Thexval stood at a podium overlooking the arena. Her voice carried clearly through the vast space. "The annual combat tournament tests the skills that make great galactic defenders," she announced. "Students will face increasingly difficult scenarios designed to challenge their tactical thinking, physical abilities, and species-specific advantages. May the best military minds prevail." Zara sat in the participants' area, watching the early matches. The first round paired lower-ranked students against each other, giving everyone a chance to demonstrate their abilities before facing the Academy's elite fighters. Kexithar, the Velthari prodigy, faced a nervous Altarian student whose species was known for defensive strategies. The arena generated a siege scenario. Kexithar had to capture a fortified position while the Altarian tried to hold it. The match was over in minutes. Kexithar analyzed the defensive setup with mathematical precision, identified the weakest points, and executed a flawless assault that gave his opponent no chance to respond. The viewing stands erupted in polite applause. "Beautiful tactical execution," Director Thexval commented. "A perfect demonstration of Velthari strategic superiority." Next came Gormath, a massive Chronari student who was favored to win the tournament's strength-based challenges. His opponent was a quick but small Skitari fighter, not Pip, but someone from his species. The arena became a ruined city with lots of debris and narrow passages. Gormath's approach was direct and effective. He smashed through walls instead of going around them, turned obstacles into weapons, and overwhelmed his opponent through pure physical force. The Skitari's speed meant nothing when there was nowhere to run. Other matches showcased different species' natural advantages. Luminar beings won through incredible speed and energy manipulation. Zelkari students used their multiple arms to operate several weapons simultaneously. Each species fought according to their biological strengths and cultural military traditions. Then Zara's name was called. Her first opponent was Jexitai, a mid-level Zelkari student known for mathematical precision in combat. As they walked onto the arena floor, Zara could hear whispered conversations in the viewing stands. "That's the human who failed the entrance exam. Why is a child allowed to compete?" This should be over quickly. The arena transformed around them. They stood in a simulated urban environment. Tall buildings, busy streets, civilian traffic, and complex terrain. The objective was simple: eliminate your opponent using any means necessary. Jexatai immediately began calculating. Zara could see his 8 arms moving in precise patterns as he analyzed sight lines, cover positions, and optimal firing angles. His species approached combat like a math problem: find the most efficient solution and execute it perfectly. Zara took a different approach. Instead of thinking about optimal strategies, she looked at the environment as a living place. The civilian traffic moved in predictable patterns. The advertising holograms created visual noise that could hide movement. The buildings had maintenance access points and emergency systems that might be useful. When the match began, Jextai moved to a calculated position that gave him excellent coverage of the most likely approach routes. His tactical analysis was flawless according to Academy doctrine. But Zara didn't use any of those routes. She disappeared into the civilian crowd, using their movement patterns to mask her own. When Jextai fired at where she should have been, she was already somewhere else. She used the advertising holograms to create false images, making him waste shots on targets that weren't there. Then she did something that made the viewing stands go quiet. She started talking to the simulated civilians. "Excuse me," she said to a holographic businessman. "Is there a way to get to the top of that building without using the main elevator?" The simulation wasn't programmed to handle this kind of interaction, but Atlas adapted in real time. The civilian pointed toward a service entrance. "There's a freight elevator in the back," the hologram said, "but it's restricted access." "Thanks," Zara replied and disappeared into the building. In the viewing stands, Director Thexaval leaned forward with confusion. What is she doing? The civilians are not part of the combat scenario. Combat instructor Drax made his grinding sound that might have been laughter. She is treating them like people instead of obstacles. Jextai continued his mathematical analysis, but his calculations were based on normal combat behavior. He couldn't predict Zara's actions because she wasn't following any established tactical doctrine. Using information from the simulated civilian, Zara reached the building's roof through a route that didn't exist in Jextai's tactical database. From there, she could see him waiting in his carefully calculated position. But instead of attacking directly, she accessed the building's emergency systems, something that was technically part of the simulation but had never been used as a weapon before. She triggered a fire suppression system that filled Jextai's area with thick foam, blinding him and making his precise calculations useless. While he struggled to adapt to the unexpected change, Zara used a maintenance zip line to reach his position and eliminated him easily. The arena fell silent. In the viewing stands, students and faculty stared in confusion. "Winner Zara Chen," Atlas announced. The reaction was immediate and mixed. Some students applauded politely. Others looked disturbed. Faculty members whispered among themselves, clearly unsure how to categorize what they had just seen. "Highly irregular," Director Thexval muttered. "Using environmental systems as weapons is not covered in standard tactical training." But it worked, Drax pointed out. Zara's next few matches followed similar patterns. Against a Luminar opponent in a forest environment, she used smoke and mirrors to negate their speed advantage. The Luminar could move faster than any other species, but speed meant nothing when you couldn't see where you were going. Against a defensive specialist in a siege scenario, she won through patience and psychological pressure, rather than direct assault. She spent the first half of the match making noise and creating false attacks that forced her opponent to waste energy and ammunition. When he finally made a mistake, she was ready. Each victory brought more attention. Galactic news networks began covering the anomalous human who was advancing through unconventional methods. Other species' reactions ranged from amusement to genuine concern. The Velthari delegation was particularly disturbed. Their entire culture was based on logical superiority and precise thinking. Zara's success through illogical methods challenged their fundamental beliefs about intelligence and capability. How can random actions defeat calculated strategy? Kexthar asked his instructor after watching one of Zara's matches. "Perhaps," his instructor replied carefully. "They are not as random as they appear." Meanwhile, Zara continued advancing through the tournament bracket. She wasn't winning through superior firepower or faster reflexes. She won by changing the nature of each fight, by using the environment in ways that her opponents didn't expect, and by treating simulated elements as real rather than just programming. Atlas was particularly fascinated by her methods. The AI began modifying simulations in real time to accommodate interactions that had never been programmed into the system. Each of Zara's matches pushed the boundaries of what the tournament scenarios could handle. She is teaching the system to be more than it was designed to be. Atlas reported to Director Thexval. That is not possible, the director replied. Systems operate within their parameters. Observe her next match, Atlas suggested. Parameters may be more flexible than previously calculated. As the tournament progressed toward the semifinals, the viewing stands became more crowded. Word had spread throughout the academy and beyond about the failed human student who was defeating carefully trained specialists through methods that shouldn't work. The bracket showed Zara matched against Kexthar in one semifinal, while Gormith faced another elite student in the other. The academy's two most promising students would have to get past unexpected obstacles to reach the final. On the night before the semifinals, Zara sat in her oversized dormitory room, reviewing footage of Kexthar's previous matches. He was everything the academy valued: intelligent, precise, and utterly logical in his approach to problems. His tactical analysis was so perfect that he usually won before his opponents realized they had lost. How do you beat someone who never makes mistakes? The answer came to her as she watched Kexthar's flawless execution for the dozenth time. You don't beat someone who never makes mistakes. You change the game so that their perfection becomes a disadvantage. Her door chimed. She opened it to find Pip, Vera, and Gorth, her fellow rejects who had been eliminated in earlier rounds but continued supporting her. Ready for tomorrow? Vera asked with her nervous arm waving. As ready as I can be, Zara replied. I think I know what I need to do, which is? Zara smiled. Something that no one expects. The arena was packed for the semifinals. Representatives from dozens of worlds had arrived to witness what galactic media was calling the most unusual tournament in Academy history. The atmosphere buzzed with tension and excitement. Zara stood at the edge of the arena floor, watching technicians prepare the most complex simulation the Academy had ever created. This wasn't just a test of combat skills. It was designed to challenge every aspect of military leadership and tactical thinking. Across from her, Kexthar waited with perfect Velthari composure. His pale face showed no emotion, but Zara could see him already processing the scenario in his mind. He had spent the last 3 days analyzing every detail of her previous matches, calculating patterns in her seemingly random behavior. Director Thexaval's voice echoed through the arena. Today's semi-final will test advanced command capabilities. Both contestants will take control of a multi-level space station under siege. They must protect civilian populations, manage limited resources, and coordinate defense against overwhelming odds. Victory goes to whoever achieves the best overall outcome. The arena transformed around them. Suddenly, Zara and Kexthar stood in the command center of a massive space station. Multiple screens showed different sections of the facility. Residential areas filled with families, industrial zones with critical life support systems, docking bays where evacuation ships waited for clearance to launch. Warning alarms blared. An enemy fleet approached from 3 directions, and the station's defensive systems were damaged from previous attacks. Thousands of simulated lives depended on their decisions. Kexthar immediately began his analysis. His fingers danced across control panels as he accessed damage reports, defensive capabilities, and evacuation protocols. Within seconds, he had created a comprehensive tactical assessment. Civilian evacuation will require 4.7 hours using current transport capacity, he announced to his staff. Enemy arrival in 3.2 hours. Optimal strategy requires prioritized evacuation of essential personnel while using defensive systems to delay enemy advance. His plan was mathematically perfect. Evacuate the most important people first, sacrifice non-essential areas to buy time, and minimize overall casualties through precise resource allocation. According to every military textbook ever written, it was the correct approach. Zara took a completely different path. Instead of analyzing the tactical situation, she started talking to people. This is Commander Chen to all station personnel, she announced over the communication system. I know you're scared. I'm scared too, but we're going to get through this together. In the viewing stands, Director Thexval frowned. Personal addresses to simulated personnel are not part of standard command protocol. Combat instructor Drax leaned forward with interest. No, but they might be part of effective command protocol. Zara continued speaking to the station's population. I need everyone to help everyone else. Families with children get priority for the evacuation ships, but I also need volunteers to help load them faster. Engineering teams, I need creative solutions to our defense problems. Security personnel, protect the civilian areas, but don't waste your lives on positions we can't hold. Atlas began adapting the simulation in real time. The AI had never been asked to model how simulated people might respond to direct personal appeals from their commander, but it calculated possibilities and started generating responses. Maintenance workers began suggesting alternative evacuation routes through service tunnels. Parents volunteered to help organize the evacuation queues. Engineers proposed using industrial equipment as improvised weapons. The entire simulation became more dynamic and unpredictable. Meanwhile, Kexthar executed his perfect plan with mathematical precision. His evacuation proceeded exactly on schedule. His defensive positions were optimally placed. His resource allocation was flawless. But his approach treated the station's population as variables in an equation, rather than thinking beings. When enemy ships began their attack, the difference in approaches became clear. Kexthar's defenders fought bravely but followed predetermined tactics. When situations changed, they waited for new orders from command. His evacuation proceeded smoothly but without flexibility when unexpected problems arose. Zara's people took initiative. When enemy forces broke through defensive line A, maintenance workers sealed blast doors to create new choke points without waiting for orders. When evacuation ships were damaged, civilian pilots volunteered their personal vessels. When power systems failed, engineers rerouted electricity through paths that weren't in any manual. The simulation began producing results that surprised everyone watching. How is this possible? A Velthari observer asked. The human's approach lacks tactical coherence. But it's working better than the coherent approach, Director Thexval admitted reluctantly. As the battle continued, Zara made decisions that would have been considered wrong by Academy standards. She abandoned important strategic positions to save small groups of civilians. She allocated resources based on emotional appeals rather than mathematical optimization. She trusted simulated people to make decisions for themselves instead of controlling every detail. Kexthar's confusion grew as his perfect plan began falling apart. His calculations were based on predictable behavior, but the simulation was no longer behaving predictably. Enemy forces found themselves fighting defenders who used tactics that weren't in any database. Evacuation procedures adapted to problems faster than command structure should have allowed. This is impossible, Kexthar muttered, recalculating his approach for the 7th time. The simulation parameters have been altered, but Atlas confirmed that no changes had been made to the basic scenario. The only difference was how the two commanders had chosen to interact with their environment. The climax came when enemy forces reached the station's core. According to standard tactical doctrine, this meant certain defeat. The correct response was to trigger the station's self-destruct system to prevent enemy capture. Kexthar prepared to execute this final solution. It was logical, clean, and would deny the enemy their objective even if it meant the loss of all remaining personnel. Zara refused to give up. All units. This is Commander Chen, she announced. They're in the core, but we're not done fighting. Engineering, can you overload the main power coupling? Security, I need you to evacuate the core sections through maintenance shafts. Civilian volunteers start setting up aid stations for wounded in the outer rings. What followed wasn't in any tactical manual. Instead of a final battle, Zara's people began an organized retreat that turned into a counterattack. Engineers used their knowledge of station systems to trap enemy forces in the core. Security teams rescued personnel that should have been written off as casualties. Civilians provided support that allowed military units to keep fighting when they should have been exhausted. The enemy found themselves controlling an empty core while facing continued resistance from every other section of the station. They had won the tactical objective but lost the strategic battle. When the simulation ended, the arena fell completely silent. Atlas displayed the final results on screens throughout the facility. Kexthar's approach had achieved a 73% survival rate among essential personnel and successfully delayed enemy capture by 1.7 hours. According to traditional metrics, it was an excellent performance. Zara's approach had achieved an 89% survival rate among all personnel and turned a defensive scenario into a tactical victory that drove off the attacking forces entirely. Winner, Zara Chen. Atlas announced. The reaction was immediate and intense. Students erupted in confused discussion. Faculty members argued among themselves. In the special viewing area reserved for galactic dignitaries, representatives from various worlds demanded explanations. Director Thexaval stood at her podium, looking like someone whose fundamental understanding of the universe had just been challenged. This result requires investigation, she announced. The simulation may have malfunctioned, but Atlas confirmed that all systems had operated correctly. The only variable had been the contestants' approaches to command and leadership. Kexthar approached Zara after the match. His usual composure was shaken. "I do not understand," he said quietly. "My tactical analysis was perfect. My execution was flawless. How did you achieve superior results through inferior methods?" "Maybe they weren't inferior," Zara replied gently. "Maybe they were just different. But logic dictates." "Logic is a tool," Zara interrupted. "It's very good for some things, but maybe it's not the only tool we need." In the other semi-final, Gormath easily defeated his opponent through overwhelming force, setting up a final match between the Academy's most promising strength-based fighter and its most unlikely survivor. That evening, as news of the semi-final results spread throughout the galaxy, Zara received an unexpected visit from Director Thexval herself. "I must ask you directly," the director said, sitting uncomfortably in Zara's oversized chair. "How are you achieving these results? What training have you received that our sensors cannot detect?" "I haven't received any special training," Zara replied honestly. "I just try to treat people like people instead of like game pieces." "That is not a military strategy." "Maybe it should be." Director Thexval was quiet for a long moment. "You realize that if you win the final match, it will call into question everything the Academy teaches about military leadership." The final match drew observers from across the galaxy. The Academy's main arena had been expanded to accommodate representatives from every major civilization. News crews from dozens of worlds broadcast live coverage of what many were calling the most important military demonstration in recent history. Zara stood in the contestants' preparation area, trying to calm her nerves. Through the transparent walls, she could see Gormath in the adjacent room. The massive Chronari warrior was performing traditional combat rituals, his stone-like muscles rippling as he practiced devastating attack patterns. He looked like a living mountain preparing for war. "Nervous?" asked a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see combat instructor Drax. The scarred Chronari's presence was oddly comforting. "Terrified," she admitted. "Gormath is twice my size and has been training for combat his entire life. I don't know how to fight someone like that." Drax's grinding laugh echoed in the small room. "In 40 years of teaching combat, I have learned something important. The strongest fighter does not always win. Sometimes the smartest fighter wins. Sometimes the luckiest fighter wins. And sometimes the fighter who changes the rules wins. What if I can't change the rules this time?" "Then you lose," Drax said simply. "But you have already proven something more important than winning. You have shown that there are many ways to be strong." Director Thexval's voice echoed through the arena as Zara and Gormath took their positions on the combat floor. "Today's final match will test the ultimate limits of military capability," she announced. "The scenario is completely randomized. Neither contestant knows what challenges they will face. This is the Academy's ultimate test of adaptability, leadership, and combat effectiveness." The arena began to shift and change around them. Instead of a single environment, the holographic system created something unprecedented. A completely unknown scenario that even Atlas was generating in real time. Suddenly, Zara and Gormath found themselves standing on the bridge of separate starships, each commanding a small fleet of vessels. They faced not each other, but an unknown alien threat that appeared on their sensors, massive ships of strange design approaching from the edge of the system. Scenario parameters. First contact with hostile unknown species, Atlas announced. Objective: protect civilian populations, and determine appropriate response to unprecedented threat. No tactical databases exist for this scenario. This was unlike any previous tournament match. Instead of fighting each other, they were being tested on how they would handle a completely new situation, one where all established tactics and training might be useless. Gormath immediately responded in typical Chronari fashion. His fleet formed battle lines and prepared for direct assault. His approach was straightforward and aggressive: identify the enemy, determine their capabilities, and overwhelm them with superior force. All ships prepare for combat. His voice rumbled across the communication channels. We will show these invaders the strength of Chronari warriors. His fleet moved into attack formation with military precision. The ships were properly spaced, weapons were charged, and defensive positions were optimal according to standard fleet engagement doctrine. Zara took a completely different approach. All ships, maintain defensive positions but do not power weapons, she ordered. I want to try something first. Her crew looked confused. In the viewing stands, military observers from various species shook their heads in disapproval. What is she doing? A Velthari admiral muttered. When facing unknown hostiles, standard protocol requires immediate defensive preparations. But Zara was thinking about the nature of the test. This wasn't just about combat effectiveness. It was about handling first contact with a completely unknown species. What if the traditional assumption that unknown meant hostile was wrong? Open a communication channel to the unknown ships, she ordered. Commander, her tactical officer replied, we have no way to establish communication with an unknown species. Then we'll have to figure out how to make one. While Gormath's fleet advanced toward the alien ships with weapons ready, Zara began trying to establish contact. She had her ships broadcast mathematical sequences, universal constants that any intelligent species would recognize. She ordered them to mirror the movements of the alien vessels, showing that they could learn and respond to patterns. Atlas watched both approaches with intense interest. The AI had never been asked to model first contact scenarios where one side attempted communication while the other prepared for battle. The alien ships responded to Zara's attempts at communication. They began broadcasting their own mathematical sequences in return. Their formation changed to mirror her ship's defensive positioning. Meanwhile, Gormath's aggressive approach triggered a hostile response. The alien ships that had been trying to communicate with Zara suddenly turned toward his fleet with obvious defensive preparations. See? Gormath announced triumphantly. They are preparing to attack. This proves that aggressive response was correct. But Zara realized what was actually happening. The alien ships were responding to the behavior they encountered. When approached peacefully, they attempted communication. When approached aggressively, they prepared to defend themselves. Gormath, she broadcast on open channels. They're not hostile by nature. They're responding to how we treat them. Weakness invites attack, Gormath replied, continuing his advance. Strength ensures victory. The situation escalated rapidly. Gormath's fleet engaged the alien ships in brutal combat. His tactical skills were impressive. Even fighting unknown technology, his aggressive strategies achieved initial success. But Zara continued trying to communicate with the aliens. As the battle raged in one part of the system, she managed to establish a basic mathematical dialogue with other alien ships. Slowly, painfully, they began exchanging simple concepts. The breakthrough came when Zara realized that the alien ships were trying to warn her about something. Their mathematical messages included references to stellar phenomena, solar flares, gravitational anomalies, radiation patterns. They weren't invaders. They were refugees fleeing a natural disaster in their home system. All ships stand down immediately, she broadcast on emergency channels. The alien vessels are not hostile. They're trying to warn us about danger in their home system. Gormath paused his attack, confused by this development. Explain. They're refugees, Zara said, continuing her mathematical dialogue with the aliens. Their star is going supernova. They were trying to warn us that the shockwave will reach this system in approximately 6 months. The revelation changed everything. What had appeared to be a military crisis was actually a humanitarian emergency, combined with a natural disaster warning. The invaders were actually potential allies bringing critical information about a threat that could destroy multiple star systems. Atlas immediately began calculating the implications. If the alien warning was accurate, several inhabited worlds in the region would need to be evacuated. The invasion fleet was actually an advanced warning system that could save millions of lives. Gormath found himself in an impossible position. His military response had been tactically perfect but strategically disastrous. By treating the aliens as enemies, he had nearly started a war that would have prevented crucial communication about a much larger threat. The final test came when both fleets had to work together to verify the aliens' warning and begin coordinating an evacuation response. This required skills that weren't taught in any academy course: cross-species diplomacy, rapid scientific collaboration, and leadership under unprecedented circumstances. Gormath struggled with the new requirements. His training focused on military command, not diplomatic cooperation. When faced with problems that couldn't be solved through force, his effectiveness dropped dramatically. Zara, on the other hand, began organizing a cooperative response. She assigned her ships to work with alien vessels and scientific survey teams. She established communication protocols that allowed real-time collaboration between different species. She treated the aliens as partners rather than former enemies. The simulation concluded with a massive joint operation to warn and evacuate threatened worlds. Zara's approach had turned a potential military disaster into a diplomatic and humanitarian success. When the arena returned to normal, the silence was profound. "Winner, Zara Chen," Atlas announced. But the victory seemed almost irrelevant compared to what had just been demonstrated. Zara hadn't won through superior combat skills or tactical brilliance. She had won by fundamentally changing the nature of the problem. Director Thexaval stood at her podium, looking like someone whose entire worldview had been overturned. "This tournament has revealed significant deficiencies in current military training doctrine," she announced slowly. "Effective leadership in an uncertain galaxy requires capabilities that extend beyond traditional tactical education." In the viewing stands, representatives from various worlds began intense discussions. Military observers who had come expecting a demonstration of combat effectiveness instead witnessed a lesson in adaptability and diplomatic thinking. Gormath approached Zara after the ceremony. The massive Chronari looked genuinely puzzled. "I do not understand how you achieved victory," he admitted. "Your fleet was smay.